Okay, I've got a little bit of vocal there, and it's nearly 10 till, so I'm going to start a little bit early. And anybody who'll come into the classroom physically tonight or should need to beam in from TV land is going to be able to go back and check this out at the end of the evening. So I'm getting us started, and this is our session for the 15th of February. And want to go up here for a moment just to do some, basically some home housekeeping. You have an exam that's due today, and that's Rock Off Chapter 1. And that's over Chapters 1 and 2. 75-minute limit, 30 items, okay? And that one is due, I think, if I'm not mistaken, excuse me. I believe it's due at midnight. And yes, it is. Okay. So, and pardon me, it's due. It's open until midnight, but it's due the 15th. Today at 6 p.m. My apologies. Okay. All right. Now that'll show you what we've got going on. Now, I'm going to click on the syllabus area. Okay. And that'll show us, the Rock Off exam that's due this week. And then next week we have the 4 Access workshop cases that you need to upload. Okay, now I'm going to go through this. All right, and let's see here. I want to go ahead and show everybody the files that you need to upload, and so they're all and this is from a file. Okay, a Word doc. Let me see if I can find this silly thing. I had it here for a minute. And what did I do with you? All right, we'll go back in here and I'll find it. And I'll go into files. I'm going to search for files and do upload. Okay, and I have this file uploads for the four access files. All right, and I'm going to enable the editing, and then I'm going to put this up. I'm going to increase the font here so you know what's due. These are due for Access Workshops 1 through 4 that are drawn, and these are drawn from the Rock Off text, and these are what are due. Okay, in terms of what to upload. So for Access Workshop number 1, I'm going to start with it. All right, you want to use the data warehouse access file in the Rock Off zip. You're going to find it in the Rock Off zip file in the files section of Canvas. So go over to Canvas, you'll find the Rock Off zip file, and then you want the data warehouse. That's for Access Workshop number 1. Okay, now Access Workshop number 2. Okay. You want to use the fact sales AW2 export. That's an Excel file in the files section of Canvas. So it's a file over here. Okay. And then Access Workshop number 3 is geographic sales. Okay. And in the file section of Canvas. And then finally, okay, and we'll do that. We're going to do a little gold and green here. And Access Workshop number 4 is the sales database that's in the Rock Off zip file, and that's, again, is in the files section of Canvas. So all of these files are in the files section of Canvas, okay? 2 of them are in the Rock Off zip file, and 2 of them are just there on their own, okay? So we're gonna take a look tonight at pivot tables. We're going to talk about them. Okay, Chapter 16 deals with pivot tables. All right, and we will, we'll go from there. Okay, and what we're going to be looking at here is just how we use an exported table or an exported query with a data set, a result set, and how we work with them. Now, chapter 16 is going to be the focus here, okay, of what I'm going to do in the next hour and a half. All right, so that's going to be the focus. And I know I'm probably going to have some people come in late, whatever. And then I would encourage you, well, you probably will be tested on it, but I would encourage you to take a look at chapter 12 at crosstab queries and pivot tables. Now there's some stuff in there that's not applicable anymore. So you'll have to be somewhat careful. All right. Now I'm going to start off basically, and when we go through this, you ought to have your textbook. You should have it ready to go. Okay. And for the Excel tables, we're gonna use the sales database. Okay. And so we want to look at that for just a moment, and we also want to look at the fact sales export. So I'm going to diminish this for just a moment, okay? And I'm going to look for fact sales, and there it is. And I'm going to download it, okay? I'm going to enable the editing, okay? And I'm going to take this, and I'm going to take this file, and I'm going to save it there on my computer into the desktop. Make sure it's on my desktop. Okay? Now, take this file and let's close it. It's on your desktop, so you're good. And we're going to diminish this browser down for a minute. All right. And I want to open up the fact sales table. Now, over in chapter 16, and again, I want to really emphasize to you that you really need the book with you. They're in chapter 16, starting over at page 334, excuse me. They talk about, okay, accessing, connecting to access. All right. Now, you can export a table, import a table, an Excel table into Access. And that table might be something that you could use for, to do whatever computational work you'd want to do, okay? So you'd want to have the opportunity to do that. So I'm going to do this, all right? I'm going to go back over here to, I'm going to diminish this down for a sec. I'm going to go back in here into Canvas, all right? All right, welcome aboard. And I started a little bit early, so don't worry about it. You can go back and scroll through, on the recording. So, but basically, I went over the stuff that's due for Access workshops 1 through 4. And again, there's a file. I'll just show you. It's a document. Okay, these are the uploads for the 4 Access workshops. It tells you what they are and tells you where to find them. Okay, and then of course we have an exam today, so we're talking about that. So now we're going to take a look at pivot tables, and we're going to start in chapter 16. All right. Now I have opened up. I've downloaded one of the files that we have to turn in for these 4 Access workshops. And the first, and one of them is this fact sales export. I want to talk about this a little bit. Now the textbook starts over in chapter 16 on importing data, okay? And they give you some information here about, the data connection wizard. And if you're working in a server environment, that will be the case. Otherwise, you're probably just going to be importing or exporting files. Okay. Now I've got this Excel file right here. Now I'm going to close it off, and I'll show you what we're talking about when we talk about importing files. All right. And so I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to open Access, and we'll be working with the sales database a little bit. So I'm going to open it up, enable the content. Now, I'm going to click External Data, this is the importing step. And the author goes into several directions, but he's talking about you have any hookup on SharePoint and all this business, and you just really don't need to do all that, okay? Basically, what you need to do is I went and got the that sales database, okay? And I'm going to import this file. Now you'll see external data, import or export. I can import Excel files. I can export Excel files. And a lot of the time, the work you'll be doing will be with that. Now, when you go back and you look at these 4 uploads for Access Workshops 1 through 4 that are going to be coming up, you're going to see that there are 2 databases in there that are in that rockoff zip file, and I give it, it's pretty extensive, okay? And then there are 2 there are 2 Excel files, okay, that were exports. In fact, I think what I'll do is this: I'm just going to go ahead and let's see. I'll make this the stuff that comes out, the databases that are part of what we're going to be doing. I'm going to go ahead and make those gold, and then the 2 Access files we're going to be working with, I'm going to convert those over to green. Okay, and you can go into the modules area or go into the syllabus area in Canvas, and you can see, okay, go into the files and you'll find that rockoff zip file, and you need to upload the data warehouse and then the sales database, and we've looked at each one of them. Now, you also have these 2 Excel files that were exports. Okay, so we've got those, and we're going to talk about that because we're going to move through chapter 16 and look at using pivot tables. Okay, a lot of the time, and even if you're dealing with a commercial product advanced of Access, many times you're going to want to utilize the ability to export data, process them much easier in a spreadsheet application like Excel. Okay, there'll be those times when you'll have a set of data in Excel, and you'll want to import them to create a table. Okay, and just getting a comfort level built with both of them is fine. So I'm going to diminish this this file here. Okay. And I'm going to come back here for a moment, and I'm going to import an Excel file. All right. And don't get worried about getting caught up. You can always go back and take a look at the thing. And I'm going to import data. Now I'm going to do the import data dialog box. I'll click Browse. Okay. And I'm going to go to the desktop, and you'll see I have this fact sales export. And we're going to look at this file, this Excel file, in just a minute or two. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Okay, and the dialog box says, do you want to append it to an existing database, or you just want to import the data, or do you want to link it? You can link, if you can link an Excel file with an Access database, although I don't know why you'd really want to do that unless you would want to update a table, but that's why you have a form. And all that being said, the vanilla of this is simple. I'm going to take something out of Excel that I have that looks like it's a good candidate for a table, okay, and throw it into Access, and then clean it up, give it a primary key, blah, blah, blah. Or I can take a table or a query that I've run in Access and export it into Excel so I can do some work with it. The whole point of this is to make sure that you understand about operability, and number 2, to make sure that you don't miss or remain uncomfortable, if you are, with working with Microsoft Excel PowerPoint. Other than this Microsoft Solver, which is an optimization tool, Power Pivot Table gives us as close as we can get to the best of both worlds with a pretty simple product to use. And so what we'll find is Excel Pivot Table lets us treat the data in there as if we're working with a database. It gives it some database functionality. And then, of course, a database is designed to store stuff, so what better place to put it? So I'm going to click OK. And it's going to walk me through a dialog box, and it's going to say what do I want, okay? And if I have column headings, I can't remember. I can't remember if I do. I think I do. So click first column has. Okay, can't be for valid names. All right, we'll go next. I forgot to look at it. And we're going to let access side of primary key. And it's going to be a messy result, but that's okay. And now if you look up here in the tables, okay, you'll see a thing called sheet number 2. That's what we just exported. Now we ran into a little bit of a question there because some of the data that we had didn't lend themselves to names. And Access gets a little bit persnickety about what you name a column. So we ran into that little issue there. Not a big deal. Now another thing, just in terms of navigating, if you come to the left shutter bar over here, you can always just limit what the objects that you want to use. But I just always put all access objects, and I'm good to go. Now I'm going to open up sheet 2 and see what we've got. Okay, and now we've got all these rows and labels, and they give us a grand total. And so we had some stuff in there that just didn't fit well with it. Now what I would do is probably go back in there, okay, and make sure that all of my columns are named correctly, and they are indeed, okay, they signify a dimension of some type. So I'm going to close this sheet 2, and I'll just dispose of it. I don't need it. Okay. What's more likely is that you're going to be exporting data. If you said it was on 100 times you do this, 5 to 10 times you might import. 9% of the time you'll be doing an export. So I'm going to diminish this down for a moment, and I'm going to open up the fact sales access workshop 2 file, or export, and this is an export. Okay, and these come from the sales database. Okay, I'll make sure that. Take a look here where he talks about. Yeah. Now, what I've got is I just exported the table over. Okay, I can also export queries, and here now I'm in a position if I want to do some analytical work. Okay, and do some computational work. It's going to be a lot easier to do and to visually depict it, say a chart, table, whatever, than I would have if I'm trying to do with it in Access or just about any other database. As I've said before, the holy grail for all this is to have an application that acts like a database, but also acts like a spreadsheet. And some days it will be there. That will be the day when we have NFL quarterbacks who are 6'5", 400 pounds of nothing but sheer muscle, and they will be able to sustain the punishment they take. And receivers that weigh 350 pounds and can run 4.1 40 and all that. But until that day and time comes, or the Lord arrives, we're working what we have. So we have this. We have the sales date, the customer ID. We have the channel ID, the salesperson. Okay, we've got all this stuff, sales type. So we've got the dimensions. We've got facts. And this is why we call it a fact table, because we have the sales date. Okay, and that's a fact. We have an order that's associated with it. So this is a fact sales table because it deals with the measures stuff I can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Okay, no big deal there. See, so okay, you're talking about chapter 16 in the Rockoff text. Where are you? Well, right now, okay, we're getting ready to go over and take a look at the very first use of the pivot table, okay? And so if you take a look at 337, they talk about the field list, how that works. So I'm going to copy, I'm going to take A1, and I'm going to scroll all the way down, and I'm going to get the array of A1 to I36, okay? So, and then I'm going to click insert. Now, we've worked with pivot tables before. If you had 1123 with me, we did pivot tables. So it's not that big of a deal. So I click insert pivot table, and then we get the pivot table dialog box. Now we've selected our range, okay? And I could either do it by highlighting it or come back in here and enter it. And here's what it's saying. If you look at it, it says fact sales, exclamation point, meaning it's the fact sales worksheet that I'm in. And it shows A1, okay, to what is it, I36. Right? Just that exclamation point after fact sales indicates, you know, that's, you know, where we are. Now, it asked me, do I want to use an external data source? No, I'm not. Do I want to put it in a new worksheet? Typically you do. Okay, I would do that just for structural clarity, visual clarity, excuse me. Now, we're going to click OK, and we'll get the pivot table. Now, this is not unfamiliar territory, especially if you've had 1123. We had one case on it. You may have been using pivot tables before, but I want to talk about them and what they're and how they're put together. And again, chapters 12 and 16 are really good background, and we'll walk you through some of the particulars of this. When you have a pivot table, you got two areas, okay? One is one that is analogous to a formula bar in Excel, and that's the one over here on the right, okay, my right side. And then the computational and output area, and that's the one over here on what is my left side. Now, the wonderful thing about the pivot table is I can mix and match these variables and get different looks at them with a minimal amount of programming. I really don't really have to do any, it's a drag and drop environment, and that's why it's such a powerful tool. Now, we've got these fields to add to report. Before we do that, though, let me talk about the structure. Think of this as a series of windows. The filter, okay, deals with everything on a page. Columns are what they are, and that is Y data, okay, vertical data, rows, and then the values are typically what will show up, things we can measure will show up in the middle, okay? That's what we're looking at, and again, that's why we call it a facts table, because it has something I can add, subtract, multiply, or divide. I can do something computational with it. It has what we call measures. So let's look at this, and we're going to start. First of all, let's go with the sales date, okay? And I'm going to put it over here in a column, and let's see how it looks, okay? Now, you say, why did you do that? Well, sometimes I will get a better look if I go vertical. It's going to depend upon how many dates I'm dealing with. And so we can put it over here in the rows, okay? Now I have dates here, and I may want to, if I have several products I want to look at, or several geographical areas I want to look at, and so I want to contain. Now, again, this depends upon, all right, the number of records that you're dealing with. Okay, see, we've got a small set of records here. It's not that big of a deal. Now, I also, if I wanted to, I could move that up into the filters. And so we could select a date and analyze the date or dates as much as we want to. Okay, Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the date over here in the rows, because this makes sense to me. And then I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to get the customer ID, and I'm put them in the columns, and there are my customer IDs. Okay. And then I'm going to get the, let's see, what do I want to do? I'm going to get the, let's get the order number. Okay. And I'm going to put that in the values. And now, on the values, you have to be careful. So make sure that if you've got something that's really a count, okay, and an order number is, those are things we count, okay? You want to click there and you want to change the value settings, and I'm just going to simply do a count. Okay? Do you see how I did that? If you did, now you'll see that you've got ones and twos. So this shows us we've got by date, by customer, the number of orders they placed. Okay? Now, you say, all right, this starts to kind of give me, this looks a little bit like kind of maybe a correlation, a table with a correlation in it between two sets of data, scattergram, and it's very close. Now, what I can do is I can start over here, and let me stop for a moment. Also, the nice thing is it will give me a grand total by row and then an aggregate total. When I click back inside here, the fields area pops in. Now, I've got the sales date, I've got the orders, the count of the order numbers, and now I want to put something into the filter. And in the filter, I'm going to put salesperson. Now I have this, I have the picture, I have the number of orders placed in these dates, okay, for all of the salespeople. If I want to focus on just one person, I can get number one. Let's see their sales. I can go back and filter this out. I can choose all again. Let's choose all. And then if I want, I can get one. And if I want multiple items, I just click this down here and look at that. So I've got salesperson ID number 2. Okay. And the nice thing about it is this: if I'm doing a report, let's say if I'm doing this on the fly, okay, like I am right now, I can just throw it out there and people can take a look at it. And what will inevitably happen is people say, well, how would this look if we do this, whatever. You probably ought to, before you go into that kind of situation, have discipline your query searches, your pivot to what's really necessary. Otherwise, you'll be doing it till kingdom come. So we can look at salesperson by salesperson. What I could do with this simply would be to take a screenshot, embed it in a report, and I've got it for every single salesperson. Or I could send this if I can be sure that I have competent users who will know what I've done here. Okay, and so we can look at the person number 3. And then we can look at person number 4. And then obviously, if I want to look at multiple items, I choose the ones I want to look at. And I'm interested in looking at salesperson ID 1, 3, and 5. And I'll click that on the ROV. Okay. Now again, remember, these are counts because I got a count of the orders. Now, one of the things I could also do, and I'm going to take the salesperson and I'm going to just simply remove them, because I'm interested in looking at, for example, market channels. So I'm going to click channel ID. In fact, I can drag and drop it over to the filter. Okay. So I'm interested in seeing what do sales look like based on the channel, on a channel ID. Now I want to take the count of orders out of there, okay? And then I want to get channel ID, and I'm going to come back down here and I'm going to get the count. So I've got by date, by count, by channel ID. And I can limit, and if I want, I'll just come here and I've got the internet. Look at that. If I want to, I can come in and look at mail. And then I think the other is by phone. And I can literally take question.
So what's the difference? Like, what information are we getting when we change it to the count of the channel?
Well, the channel ID is the ID that, like, it's the ID or it identifies the type of sale that I've made, okay? And that marketing channel, internet, mail, or phone. So I can use the category, okay? But because I have a fact sales table here, that every time it lists whatever the ID was, I can take that ID, which is I can take that ID and I can count them, okay? That's what I'm doing. So I'm looking date by date at what channel, okay, produced the highest ones on these given on these given dates. Does that make sense, everybody? So that's why this is such a powerful tool, because I can mix and match and get some different looks at this. Now I'm going to take the channel ID out, okay? And in fact, there I also had. Let me go back there for a minute. I missed something. There's channel ID is the filter, and I'm going to get the channel ID over here and values, and I want to count. And then I've got it by customer ID. Okay. So I can look over here and I can see, okay, the sales that were made on, that date. I'm looking at the row, okay? And then, of course, I not only have the date, but I have the totals for all of the channel IDs. But I'm just going to do one, or the internet. Okay? Okay? I can do, of course, the mail or the phone or all of them. Now, don't forget that in the columns, okay? Don't forget in the columns, I have customer IDs. Okay? So customer ID number 2, all right, they had one sale on June. They had one order on June 11th, and then they had one, yeah, and then they had one on it looks like on the 6th, and then one on the 13th. If you put your cursor up there, it'll give you a pop-up that will tell you what you're looking at. So again, we're not going to break it. So I'm going to take the count of channel IDs. I'm going to take the channel ID off there, and I still have this, and I want to get the order number. But now let's see. Let's look at the. I want to look at the line price, and that's a measure. So I'm going to put it down here in values. Now I've got the sum of the line price, sum of the line price, okay, per customer per date. Okay. Now I can also then go back in here and put order numbers, and then I can start to build these kind of on a sub. This is when it gets a little bit complex. Okay. So we have to do some strategizing. Now I'm going to look at the order number. Okay, and you can see what I'm talking about. Or I can come over here into the sales dates. And this one under the sales dates is makes a little bit more sense. Those are the dates. And also, I can look at over here and start to say, okay, I've got the customer IDs, okay, and I've got the sum of the line price, and I'm good to go. Now, I want to go back for a moment to the fact sales table. And again, we use the pivot table and mess with it a little bit. And on these, the sum of the line price, what I might want to do, I'm going to do a value setting, and I'm going to get the average. Excuse me. So that's pretty much what we're doing with that table in terms of a pivot table. Now, I'm just going to take these out of here. I'm going to remove everything out. Excuse me. And I'm going to get a new analysis. Now, what I probably would want is something like, you know, how many orders were placed on a certain date or by a certain customer or placed by a certain sales ID. But here I'm gonna go back to my issue, my first, probably most important dimension, and that's going to be the sales date. Put those in rows, and this time I'm gonna put let's see, good. This will be good. I'm gonna take the channel ID, okay, and I'm gonna put that in the filter. And then I want to come into the product type, pardon me, the product ID, and I want to get the count. So I'll change the values field settings, I'll do count, and there I am. Now if I want to, I can move this product ID, and I'm going to put this over here in the column. Now I kind of have it crosstabs. I have how many times that order was placed on the given, through a given market channel per date, and I've got the count. It's just going to depend upon what you're working with. Now, in this one, we've got two dimensions, and I'm going to take the product ID stuff off for a minute. Let's see, I'm going to leave it in the column. And here I'm going to get the line price and put it into values because those are true values. Instead of the sum of the line price, I'm going to come back up here, okay? And let's see. Let's get the maximum. I'm going to do the product, count numbers. Let's get the average. We'll do that. And this will give us the averages values on those line prices. Okay. So that you know, kind of in a nutshell shows you a little bit about what we can do with this. Now, there's another Excel table over there, and if you want, you can save this file on your desktop now and then upload it into the Access Workshops 1 through 4. I'm not going to come unglued if you put something that I wanted in one in different. Don't worry about that. So I'm going to close this off for just a moment, okay? And I'm going to save it. It's down on my desktop. And I'm going to go back up here, okay? Go back into Canvas. And now I want to get that other file. Let's see, I'm going to open that back up. There's my Word file. And I want to get the other XLS file, and that's Geographic Sales Access Workshop 3. I labeled them so they'd be fairly easy for you to work with. And I'm going to put Geographic. I think trying it with a C would work, typing. My apologies, I've got some kind of a sneeze thing going on here. So I'm going to download, and I know it's very, very hot in here, so I'm not going to keep us that terribly long because my constitution is so delicate, I might faint. I don't know what to do, so, you know, I can make fun of people from the South. My family's from there. They are who they are. And then they came here. Obviously, you know, the lush green lands of the Appalachians were surely not as attractive as a flat red earth place called Oklahoma. I wasn't there for the decision, but this is where I ended up. Okay, now this is a geographic, we have sales by geography. This is a very simplistic export, and it's the region, the state, and the sales. Okay, and again, this is from this table. We had exported it, and this is as bare bones as it gets. We've got the region, we've got the state, and then we've got the sales. Okay, and again, we can do some work with the pivot table. Generally, if I look at this, I can see I've got 2 dimensions and 1 measure. The 2 dimensions are region and state, okay, and the measure is obviously sales. So I basically have a region by, I basically have 6, if I'm not mistaken, the comparisons. I've got a region by sales, a region by state. No, I don't. I've got 2, 4. I've got region by sales, state by sales. 2, earth domain. Well, and then total would be, that'd make 3. Okay, let's do this and go ahead and we're going to highlight everybody there starting at cell A, okay, and working our way through to D10. And I'm going to click Insert Pivot Table. I'm going to put it in a new, and there I'm ready to go. And you say, what if I wanted to mix and match these 2 exports to make a little more complex table than this? You certainly could. Just, go to open the other one up, copy the fields in, and you're good to go. So if you chose to do that, you could amplify the level of analysis a little bit easier. This is pretty straightforward. So we want to see the region. And I put the region up here as the filter. I'm going to put the state, obviously, as I want to see them in rows. And then I'm going to take sales. And that shows us a nice little tidy set. Now, if I want to choose in terms of a particular region, I'll do Midwest. Okay. New England. And the Southeast. I've got the sales. Notice I have them by state. You say, well, could I look at it a little different? Certainly. I'm going to take the state. I'm going to get rid of the region. And I'm going to put states in columns. Okay. And I'm going to look at those and look at the sum of sales. Now, the nice thing is that also, if I want, I can come down here to the values. And I can click Value Field Settings. I can get the average for those. If I want, this is where the real value of this comes in. I can get the standard deviation. And it's giving me a bad output. Let's give me a grand total though. Why aren't you giving me the standard deviation of sales? Oh, you little bugger. All right. Oh, okay. We're dividing it over number. That's why. All right. Let's skip that one. It's giving us junk. Well, let's go back up to the value field settings and let's just do the sum. Okay. All righty. And then when we did, now, here's what I would do instead of I've got the values here, instead of playing around with this, I can always just go ahead and insert the function and the standard deviation, and I'm going to do this for a sample. Okay, and here's my sample. Okay. And I've got my standard deviation of sales. Sometimes it's easier just to pop outside of it and just go ahead and do the computation work and let it slide. Now, you say, why would that matter? Well, if I have a standard deviation on sales, okay, then it becomes an issue. Now I'm going to do the average. So I'm going to put the standard deviation and put an SD there for that. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click equal average. Okay. Back to want to insert the function there. Oh, it's not going to, is it going to give me a mean instead of that? I'll look at my functions for just a minute. Well, equal. There we go. I had to spell it average. I was being lazy. The average. And I'll start over here. Now, since I have a standard, an average, here's my average. Okay. Then I'm in and let's go ahead and just make this, click on home and let's make this look like money. Okay, we'll do that. And here's our SD and our average. Now, bold those up. Now, having the standard deviation and having the average computed, I'm in a position to build if I want standard deviations. So 1 sigma above this is going to be 29,000. 2 sigmas above it are going to be, let's call it, it'd be 28,000. 2 sigmas would be 36,000. 1 sigma below would be 13. 2 below would be 5. So I have a way now to judge sales. Okay. Often what will happen is that when people will analyze sales data, they don't take into account any way possible to try to wash the data down. So we take out issues, say maybe of scale or types of establishments. And again, that's just something that makes sense. It's just reasonable to do that and to say, okay, who's really the outlier up or down? And a 2 sigma or above is an outlier. Okay, and so we can basically work with 1 sigma, 2 sigma, and then -1, -2, and we have a range only between -1, -2. So if that there is, so if we'll do a sigma 1, sigma plus 1, okay, and it's sigma, not sigmods. Sigma is the same as standard deviation, but it's the more formal term that you should use because when you work with a set of so-called normal data, you have an average, then you have a standard deviation, and 1, 2, or how many ever above, based upon how far it lies, it's an outlier from that measure central tendency being the mean. So sigma is just another term for a standard deviation. That's really all it is. So if you're out in business and you hear people talk about 6 sigma, they're talking about your 6 standard deviations above the mean. Now, yeah, and people work in quality control and quality assurance will say, okay, let's see, the durability of the upholstery in this Alfa Romero needs to be 6 sigma. Why? It's an Alfa Romero, and that stuff, it should be beautiful for years. Okay, and they have a pretty good idea of how long stuff will stand up. Otherwise, now on the other hand, you might say, well, ours, for our small little Focus here, or small little cheap car, getting people started car, a Kia or something like that, really, really tiny. You may have 3 sigma below. All of the vinyl and everything will wear out before the car. I had one of those. I had one of the very first Honda Civics, and I got put 340,000 miles, and everything went to pot except the engine, the drivetrain, the brakes, everything. The car functioned beautifully, but the insides of it started just to look terrible. And then when the air conditioning went out, the people at the Honda dealers back of it said, you'll spend as much money fixing this and installing a whole new air conditioning system as you would to buy a new car. So I said, okay. So I bought an Accord, which was one of the finest vehicles I've ever driven in my life. The early Accords were just off the charts. So when we talk about that, we talk about outliers in terms of their goodness, their quality, their size. Either way, some kind of categorical measure, that we try to apply to them. But here's what we know: if the sigma, sigma plus 1 is going to be $29,000. Now I'm rounding these two pieces of data, okay? And the sigma, or the mean, or the average, we'll call it the mean, is the proper term, excuse me, but Excel persists in calling it an average, is going to be the 21,000. I have a curse today. And the mean is 21,000. And then sigma -1, as you would guess, sigma is a Greek word, and sigma -1 is going to be 21,000 minus 8, so it's going to be 13,000. Now, if the data are distributed, and I'll size those up for everybody so you can see, if the data are distributed, if they're normally distributed, in other words, if you had all of them and they would look like a bell curve, this is good, okay? That's not always the case. There's oftentimes data don't fit that. And if you've taken management science with me, when we've talked about using the optimizer, the solver, we've talked about a simplex LP where we assume just a straight linear relationship, and then what we call a nonlinear, and then what we call an evolutionary. So if we're assuming that these are normally distributed data, then I can say this based upon, I can say that 34% of everything will fall right here, 14% will fall here, so that's about 48%. It tends to be 34, 14, and 2 is how I learned it. Now, that's not exactly, I'm a little high on the exact percentages, but in terms of the percentage on the normal curve where something fits, so-called normal curve, I would expect 68% of the time, okay, that I would get values within this region, okay? And that's just statistical reasoning. So when I see figures within, those are what I would expect to see. And they help me figure out one of the most interesting things. And I'm a baseball freak, and people love baseball are also usually statistics freaks and trivia freaks. And for years, as I was a kid growing up, you'd have arguments over who was the greatest home run hitter. Was it Hank Aaron? As I got a little bit, I was older than a kid. Was it Hank Aaron or Babe Ruth? And we had these arguments. Who's the greatest hitter? Period. Is it Ty Cobb or Pete Rose? Okay. Well, you could argue that when Babe Ruth was playing, there was no training table. The Babe probably would have eaten the training table if he'd had the chance. They usually showed up in the park after having 6 or 7 Franks, 4 or 5 beers, and usually with a cigar. So he didn't do much on terms of his physical training throughout the year. One year he took care of himself, and that was the year he hit 55 home runs. And the next year he continued the regimen. The Yankees said, "You're fat and you're out of shape." And the Babe said, "Yeah, that's true." So the next year he hit 60 home runs. And interestingly, somebody asked him, does it bother you that you make more than the President of the United States? And this is during the Depression. He said, "No, I had a better year." So, hey, there we go. But if you look at him versus his peers, okay, he's way above the average in terms of home runs. If you look at Mark McGwire when he was with the Cardinals, I think that year, and of course you've got the steroid issue, that thing, but he hits, I think, was it 74 home runs, 73 or something like that, and Sammy Sosa had 68. So if you look and you say, okay, where would he hit his peers? Well, even if he hadn't had the, even if he had not had that stigma, you know, there'd be questions. Now, Hank Aaron was someone who is the real deal. We know he wasn't on steroids, okay? He was operating on adrenaline. A lot of people don't know this, is he was going through his thing of breaking Babe Ruth's record. He got hundreds of hate letters and death threats every single day. Craziness. And so he was, his differential in terms of a standard deviation above his peer group is close to the Babes. Okay. And so you got to say, all right, these are people that belong in Hall of Fame. Okay. Because you got to remember, baseball at one point was played only on the East Coast, and people rode trains, and they didn't work out year round. I think until the last 5 or 6 years of his career, Stan Musial had a summer job. I mean, he had a winter job because they weren't paying him enough to get by or do well, and there was no such thing as free agency. Well, that all being said, we can do a little bit of work with these, and so you can see how we can do some interpretation. And again, we've just taken and we've used the table, the pivot table, to do some work. Now, the text is the Rockoff text, and that's the blue one here, is going to talk a lot about cross-tab queries and all that business. And I wouldn't be all that concerned. Now, if you want to go beyond this, all right, and these two simplistic files, I'm going to close this off and I'm going to save it. Okay, you can go back in here and we'll go to the tables and we'll get the Rockoff files, the Rockoff zip file. Okay, and we'll download it and we'll get the sales database. Open that up. Okay, now I'm going to take that sales database and I'm going to attempt to throw it. Good, I got it. Now, you say, okay, what's the point here? Well, the point here is I've got enough here to do some work with in terms of doing a little bit, really exporting a lot of tables. And let's just go ahead and let's look, and we have some forms there, but we've got sales by state. I can do a whole lot of different things with this. This is a fairly complex table. Now I'm going to close it off for a minute though, okay? And I want to look at, in that Rockoff zip file, and I'm going to look at the data warehouse file, okay? Now this one's going to be a little bit more complex, and you'll see because we have all of these dimensions and we have all of these queries, okay? And again, it just is a matter of, you know, we've got the DW sales table, the data warehouse, okay? I've got all types of data here I can work with, and I can export this, into Excel, and I've got a lot of dimensions, and I've got some good measures here, and so I could really do some heavy lifting. The same would be the report of the product analysis. Now, let's open that up. I've got to go through these parameters. Forget it. Let's take this DW sales, and we're just going to do a live export here. And so you should have the this data warehouse table open, and we're going to go up to DW sales. Okay. And I'm going to export it to Excel. And I'm going to put it on my desktop. Just use the dialog box. And then we can go down here and take a look at where's my little friend at? There's the fact sales. Ah, on my side. So what did I do with you? All right, back to the drawing board. I've had one of those days where most of nothing works just like that. All right. I've got the zip file. I don't want to do that. I'll just download it fresh. Okay. I'm just going to put these over here and see what I've got. All right, good. And I'm going to open up the data warehouse. Of course, I have a whole lot more stuff I can work with here in terms of, I have all of these dimensions, okay? And I have the DW sales table, okay? And so we'll open it up for just a minute. And when you take this view, okay, and this is going to show the relationship between these tables and the fact sales tables, what feed them in, then you can start to get an idea, okay, of how useful this can be and how many drill downs I can be just simply due to the sheer the relatedness of all of this. I mean, this schema pulls everything together, and you know, if you export it, you're going to get all that. Got a lot of stuff to work with, and that's pretty typical of a fact table. You're going to have all these dimensions attached to a few measures, not a whole lot, but a few. And we have you know, things like over here we have the sales date, okay, and we've got zip, we've got data, geographic data, and we can really start to go town. Now, I want to say something, just for your uses, okay. Well, for your information, this will help you. We're looking at a very simplistic schema in terms of what's out there in the real world, and we're also dealing with kind of an absence of measures, so we don't get too overwhelmed with the number of measures we have, okay. And so you start talking about, you know, lots of records, and these aren't a lot of records. Then you can see how much we can really do some sifting and work, particularly if we take data and throw it into the pivot tables. Okay. So pivot tables are your friend, I guarantee you. They're very, very useful for helping you discern through some things, and just do some serendipitous searching if you choose to. But usually you'll have a more disciplined search. Okay. Now it's getting up to 6:52, and I started 10 minutes early, and it's really uncomfortable in here. And I do appreciate you guys that stayed in here. For those of you at home, you know, I hope whatever you're doing there in TV land, you're being good. Now, I want to click on the modules, okay? And we're going to start to move into working with the writing some SQL, okay? And the textbook that we'll be using is the Patrick text, the SQL Essentials. It's the one that's got an SQ and little blocks out there. It's by John Patrick. And what we're going to do is just start progressively working through the code. Now let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go over here to the to the files section. Okay. And I want to find the Patrick files, or it would be the lunches database files, one of the two. Uh-huh. Thank you. That's what we want. You know, I could have just Isn't it interesting that I teach about databases, but I won't use a search function? That's like the cobbler's children have no shoes. But I prefer to think of it as secretly I'm a priest and a raconteur. Well, yeah, it's Thursday night. What the heck? All right. Now I'm going to diminish this down for a minute so we can just take a look at it. If you look at the very first, you're going to see the database that we're working with, and that's the SQL fund. Okay? Now, SQL fund is like a data warehouse, okay, because it has all kinds of tables for us to be working with. All right? So you're going to see what you'll see in very end. He has a couple of forms that he's created to input data, and there are some queries there, but these are like constant queries, like numbers 0 to 9 or 0 to 99, 99 on. So these are kind of auxiliary little queries. We'll start working and running this database, okay? And we'll talk about on this in part 2. What I'll do is I'll walk us through again just how we're going to be working with this. Now, let's go back here for just a second, and you're going to see it says access code for specific chapters. Okay. Patrick has created code, okay, that we can use to cut and paste into the SQL fund and run a query. I'll show you an example. This is from number 1, okay? And he says, doesn't change, but it's just some results running. Okay, that's fine. And one thing you'll want to do is you go chapter by chapter, okay? Now here's the very first one. And this is really in its rawest form what a query, structured query language looks like. It's a select, and that asterisk means everything. And from the L underscore employees database, and then the semicolon ends the statement, okay? And what this says is I want to get everything from that table, okay? You say, if the table's there, why don't I just open it up with a click, okay? But I want you to understand, even if you do that, all right, there's an underlying set of language that's happened. SQL is what we call a command language, and that means it says, get this for me, get it from here, put it in this fashion, or report it to me in this fashion, and that's all. It's not like a full-blown programming language where you have to embed the program in whatever client you work with, okay, and then define data and all that stuff. It's just intended to do this, run databases. Now, in the Patrick text, you're going to see times when he talks about Oracle versus Access SQL. Oracle has a structured query language that has some nuances that are a little bit different from Microsoft Access. It's not going to make any big difference, but when you see those, okay, you should say, okay, I see a little bit of the differences, but they're structurally the same. Okay. Now, in chapter 1 of that book, and I'm just going to go over there for a minute, and he talks about that. He has, well, he talks about tables and their construction, which you guys kind of have a handle, or should have a handle on that already, and examples of tables. And then he gives us an example of a table. If you look at the Patrick text, you're going to see he shows you on page 30 a table in Oracle format and then a table in Access format, okay? And then he says, okay, I want to see everything in the table called L underscore employees, okay? And he has that do that. Now, he says, why not do it more for the merrier? And if we could do it for the employees, let's do it for all of these different departments, pardon me, these different tables, employees, departments, lunches, and foods, okay? Now, let's do that one. Now, don't fall into the trap of thinking I can run several of these at once. You can't. I'm going to click Select Employees. And I want to make sure I have the SQL Fun open there, and I do. Who can resist that? It says SQL Fun. How can you resist that? I don't know how you could go through the entire week and not just want to come in here and run queries all day. I don't know. So we're going to click Create. And I'm going to come into Query Design. Okay, and this looks familiar to you, where we choose the tables and the fields, and if we have some expressions and all that business. And in the far left corner, click SQL. And about 95% of all queries are select queries. And so we're going to select everything that's in the employees table. And I'm going to run it. And there it is. Now, you say, okay. And what we're going to do is we're just going to work through progressively more complicated queries and get those result sets. Now, the reason I have you do this is so that if an employer ever says, have you ever worked with SQL? You can say, certainly, I've seen Oracle, I've worked with Access, and I've got a couple of other products you'll kind of get an introduction to. So when you go out to work, you'll be armed for everybody can work with Excel out there. But folks that really understand databases and how to put them together are going to have an advantage. So I've run the query, okay, and I've got that done. I'll go back down here to the SQL view. Now, the reason that databases are so tremendously powerful and useful is this. With the query language, when I run a query, we save the query, not the data. Okay? This is like we take a picture of it, and then you'll notice it says view, the data sheet view. Here's the data sheet view. Now, if I save this as Keith's query, all right, what will really be saved is the language. And so because we're able to not have to restore and we'll get into working with tables, but tables usually don't get changed unless somebody has the authority to do it, because they're the heart of everything. But being able to just save this takes up a whole lot less server space. And when Google sees you do this enough times with certain things, you'll see the little things where you can click on it. It'll give you 5, 6, 7, 8 different kinds of combinations you might be after, or if you misspell it, it'll say, did you mean this? Because they just compile all that, and somewhere it hits that compiler and you're good to go. So we'll be doing that, and I'll walk us through chapter 1 of the Patrick text, and I would really encourage you to do that. Just especially there on page 24, where they talk about 21, excuse me, talk about the differences between Oracle and Access, okay, and some of the design features. And what he will do, I'll show you an example there. He likes to give us a little bit of a business, a little bit of a problem to work with, and then he shows us the beginning table and the ending table, okay? And you're going to see some of that over on chapter 2. In fact, page 35 really shows you. He says, show an example of a select statement that uses all the clauses just listed, and show the employee ID, blah, blah. And he gives you the code up there, and then he'll have some little notes. Now, these are both supposed to be Oracle and Access. This is page 35. There's the code. There's the beginning table, and then the result after you run the table, after you run the code. So we'll be doing that and talking about that, and we'll be working on some things like data integrity, okay? Different types of dimensions, slowly changing dimensions versus quickly changing dimensions, and we'll just be building these up. Now, this is good for you to understand it, but also I'm just a believer that doing this all the time probably increases your cognitive skills. I'm just believe that, because it makes you think, and you have to walk yourself through a process at its time. And at the end, near the end of the course, I'll give you guys about 9 or 10 queries to write based upon a little business problem that you're given. Okay, and this will also give us some opportunities to see. So you're going to get to see the database from really a database administrative view, where you can do anything in the database, And then when you go out to work, you'll have that limited view, but you'll understand what's going on behind it. Okay. And you know, if you're going to drive, you know, if you're going to drive a Formula, if you're going to drive in a Formula racing car, you probably don't need to know everything about it, but you need to know a lot. You need to at least understand some of the things in it. So that's going to do it for us, folks, for tonight. I'll post a second recording, okay? And I do appreciate you hanging in here with me because it is very, very warm. So I'm going to stop now, and I'll do the recording and upload it, and then I'll do a part 1 tomorrow or Saturday while I'll walk through some more of the Patrick text and get us started. Okay? Thank you much. And those of you out there, thank you much. Take care. Everybody have a good weekend.